Chapter 4. The holy beasts were supposed to be the guardians of the digital world, its protectors. They were supposed to be above such emotions as greed, lust, envy, and pride. They were supposed to be the role models for the Digimon they resided over as they governed for a new era of peace. Protectors his ass. Those four, since the moment they came into existence, had been nothing but trouble. They caused a war, division among the different authorities. They caused the virus Digimon to be isolated, hated by the other five. They tried to cause widespread genocide. They tore down kingdoms that had once thrived and prospered for centuries. And they called him and the others monsters. They had the nerve to use innocent children for their own agenda. To use their king, threaten him, attempt to kill him, just because of who he was. How dare they? Grand Cross. The last of the Devas fell. Not one survived as their data was destroyed, never to be reborn. Cold blue eyes stared down at the four holy beasts. For 17 years he had been trapped within his underground prison, being tortured to the point of exhaustion, having his energy slowly, painfully drained from him. He could now no longer stay in his perfect form, but that was okay. He didn't need that form to seek his revenge. For his king, for his son, he would give his own life if it meant somehow sparing his. Zuchaomon was the first to strike. Swirls of flame surrounded his form, but Lucemon was completely unaffected. With a flap of his 8 wings, and with an elegant glow around him, the flames dispersed and vanished, as if they had never been there. The arrogant holy beast stood frozen in place in the air, shocked and stunned. Impossible! They truly had no idea who they were messing with. Do you really think, just because I'm no longer in my perfect form, that I am not capable of protecting myself against you four? There was no emotion in his voice as he spoke. The air around him grew cold as he allowed the rage to take over. He had only been holding back out of fear for the other demon lords and for Ken. With the seal in place, they could have killed him any time they wanted, no matter what world he was on. He no longer had to worry. He had sensed the others gathering the crowns of sins for the ritual. The only way to fight a spell made of corrupted light was with the purest of darkness. Without his crown, there was no way to keep the darkness within him in check. He could easily succumb to the darkness if he was not careful. It was so easy to fall into darkness's enchanting allure, but it was very hard to return to the light. As the holy beasts attacked, each one soon falling by his might, he realized that it was okay. If he did fall one day, if he did lose his way, his sanity, he knew it would be okay. He had faith in his friends. He knew his beloved would come for him and hold him close. He knew his friends, his family, would be there with smiles and a pat on the back. And he knew his son would be there to dive into the darkness and bring him back to the light. Where are we? They were in a very white room that was as long as a hallway and as endless as the sea. Bubbles floated innocently around them, several feet above the ground and just about eye level. Lilithmon gazed at Beelzebumon, uncertain of how to respond to his question. I'm not sure. She glanced at the bubbles suspiciously. Was this an effect of removing the seal, or something else? We should keep moving. The boys nodded as they followed her down the endless space of white. As they walked further into the endless room, more and more bubbles entered from somewhere in front of them. One of the bubbles had been about arm's length when they heard the sound of waves swaying violently. The ocean in the world of darkness was always calm. The only time it had been that violent was when Ken first appeared in that world, distraught and terrified. Being darkness in human form, Ken's emotions were directly tied to this world. His hopes, dreams, fears, and despairs affected this world, and sometimes became reality. Lilithmon looked into the bubble and blinked at what she saw, not only within the bubble, but within her own mind. A 3-year-old child was sitting on the sandy beach as he cried over his knees. A memory? "I don't like it here," the 3-year-old sobbed softly. "Why am I always alone?" They had all felt the pull that day, the pull of their king calling. All virus Digimon would have felt it, no matter the distance. "Why are you crying, little one?" Lucemon asked as he bent in front of the child. He had been on the beach when he felt the call. He had been the only one to comfort the child on the cold beach. "I'm lost." The memory soon vanished, returning them to the room filled with bubbles, as the bubble floated away. "These must be Ken's memories," Barbamon speculated, his hand running through his long white beard. At least she wasn't the only one feeling a bit disoriented from the experience. "Without the seal, his memories are returning." Beelzebumon frowned as he looked at the bubbles that were filling up the room. "If that's the case, then where's he?" Barbamon pointed ahead, where the bubbles were coming from. "Follow the bubbles." They did so in silence, doing their best not to intrude on the memories that passed by them. But they were a bit curious as they glanced at a few precious memories that occurred since they last saw him, and a few they were all too familiar with. "Nia-san hates me." Ken was in Beelzebumon's room with the other sitting next to him, looking worried as Ken sulked on the bed. "No, he doesn't," Beelzebumon from the past said. "He's just stressed out from the whole genius thing. I'm sure he didn't mean to snap at you. Everything will be fine. You'll see." He smiled wickedly, unnoticed, to the child. "But if it makes you feel better..." Beelzebumon lifted his fists like a boxer, pretending to punch something in front of him. "I'll give him the 1-2. The 7-year-old laughed, a smile returning to his face. "Big brother Beelze!" The bubble floated away as another took its place, but this one made them frown. This one wasn't of Ken's memories. Due to his current state at the time, he should not even be aware of the conversation around him. Someone had planted this memory. But who? And why? "I don't understand. Why is Janai doing this?" The Chosen of Courage was banging on the locked door. "I don't know." Ryo Akiyama was sitting next to a chair next to Ken's bed. Ken's breathing was shallow and slow as his body tried to fight against the dark seed, leaving the boy weak and ill, barely conscious. "But whatever this thing is, it's dangerous enough to scare the holy beasts into betraying us." Taichi turned to his friend, concerned. "How dangerous are we talking about?" "Enough for Janai to separate us from our Digimon and lock us up when we refuse to leave Ken here alone." Taichi stood still, stiffening with every second that passed as he followed Ryo's line of thinking. "No, Janai wouldn't. He's our friend. Why would he want to hurt Ken-kun? He's done nothing but help us." Ken was the same age as his sister. He would be damned if he allowed anything to happen to the young boy. "How well do you know him, Yagami?" Ryo asked with a frown. "Janai could have easily questioned their commands to separate us from our Digimon and Digivices. He still did it without a question. I don't know about you, but I don't trust him, nor the holy beasts, I don't know what they're planning to do to Ken, but I will protect him with my last breath. They will have to get through me first. Taichi collapsed to the ground, his back resting against the door. What do we do? Ken stirred as he shifted from consciousness and unconsciousness again. Rio removed the damp cloth, re-dipping it into warm water before returning it to Ken's forehead. I noticed one of the guards was more than just a little upset with the way we were being treated. I think I can convince him to help us find our partners and escape. Taichi smiled. I think I saw a TV not far from here. We can use that to escape. Rio nodded as the plan came together, but he was still uneasy about something. What's wrong? Yagami, I need you to promise me something. Anything. Rio paused to look at Ken as he opened his eyes slightly, but closed them before he could regain consciousness. If we get caught, I'm going to stay behind. No matter what happens, I need you to get Ken out of here. Akiyama, I'm not going to leave you behind. Yagami, the holy beasts cannot get Ken. I need you to get Ken to safety as I fight them off. If something happens to me, you must promise me that you will protect him. Rio. Promise me. He sighed. Ken was a fellow chosen, young and innocent like his sister. He would protect him even if he had to leave his partner and his best friend behind. I promise. The memory left a bitter taste in their mouths, knowing that the boys had failed to get Ken to safety before Janai placed the Holy Beast seal on him, forcing them and Lucimon to watch. Of course, Janai had made sure the boys never spoke of this event. Rather, he threatened them, or wiped their memories as well. It was unclear. Lilithmon took an uneasy breath as she forced herself to walk on. They were now reaching memories that made their eyes narrow and their stomachs coil in rage, disgust, and sorrow. The memories of Ken's neglect, his abuse, his 3 near-death experiences. And then there was the female that shattered him. Death to the female. Lilithmon silently seethed, but made sure not to show her inner fury, as she and the others found an open door that led to one of the deserts of Server. The sun was beating down on them, far hotter than it probably should be. Blue eyes glanced around as she tried to search for the young man and the monster they were searching for. It didn't take long to find them. Millenniumon was huge in comparison to the small human and the rest of the environment. And the explosion of sand and energy blasts over an abandoned sand village was very hard not to miss. That way. Beelzebumon flew into the air when he had transformed into blast mode. She was unsure how he was able to get into that form without their king's aid, but she didn't question it as they all flew to their destination. Ken was running. He wasn't sure where he was going, nor how he would get there. He didn't care. Anywhere was better than being in the same place with a very angry, very dangerous Millenniumon that wanted nothing more than to end him permanently. Rio, Tiachi, XVmon, War Greymon, and Stingmon had just been here. They had been running from Janai and several Digimon for some reason. The 2 11-year-olds had been screaming about a TV set on the other side of the sandy village. They just had to keep running. But then something strange happened. A strange golden seal had appeared in the sky, causing Janai and the other Digimon to just disappear. This had to be a dream. There was no way people just disappear, unless the one who did it was Millenniumon. Millenniumon had been screaming and roaring at them as they stood there in shock. He should be dead. There was no way he survived their last attack. He disintegrated in front of their eyes. The Digimon had wasted no time in evolving, ready to finish things off once and for all. As Agumon evolved, he and Rio were about to fuse their Digimon into Paildramon to fight Millenniumon once more. when 7 strange, colorful chains with odd markings emerged from the sandy ground, destroying the strange golden seal inscribed with Digimoji that looked very familiar, but he couldn't place his finger on it, that had been hovering in the sky. The shattering of the seal had caused a bright light. When the light vanished, and when he could see again, his friends and their Digimon were gone. Ken hid behind one of the farthest houses he could find. He was alone with the Digimon that could freeze time around him and tear his body apart piece by piece. He shuddered at the imagery as he crouched down low, hoping the evil god would not find him as he blasted one house after another. Ichijuji. A house to his far right was destroyed by beams of energy. He was so dead. When I find you, I'm going to kill you. Once I do, I will take over your body, destroy those demon lords and all you love, and then those bloody holy beasts are next. Ken trembled as he covered his mouth to keep himself from making a sound that could alert Millenniumon to his hiding spot. He was getting closer. The house next to him was destroyed amidst his panic and fear. He closed his eyes as Millenniumon charged up his cannons once again. His house was next. Oh God, I'm dead, I'm dead, I'm dead, I'm dead, I'm dead. Mugen! Chaos Flare! Flame Inferno! Hell's Flame! Ken's eyes snapped open just in time to see streams of hot, burning flames and a wave of dark energy colliding into Millenniumon. The Digimon screamed as he was thrown backward by several feet. Beelzebumon, Demon, and Belphamon, Rage Mode, flew overhead in a vengeful fury towards the still screaming Millenniumon. Ken froze for a moment as he puzzled over how his Digimon family, when he was a child, managed to get here. He would have sworn they were still trapped within the world of darkness. As he puzzled over this, Barbamon, Leviamon, and Lilithmon landed in front of him, protectively. "Are you all right?" she asked, concerned, as any mother would. "I think so," he said, still a bit shaken. "How did you get out of the world of darkness? I thought the Holy Beast spell kept you trapped there." "Ken," Barbamon said, "we never left. This is all in your head." "What?" "We had to force him back into your body. But as long as he is able to physically and mentally attack you, he can escape again. We must not let that happen." "How?" "How does one stop a monster that even the Holy Beasts feared? How does one stop a monster that can destroy worlds, redo history, and can tear its victims apart from the inside without anyone knowing? You must strip Millenniumon of his powers. The only way to do this is to bind him to you." "Bind?" Ken could not voice the question he really wanted to ask. Why him? Hadn't he suffered enough? He may have been the one to save Rio from being hit by the Dark Seed, knowing full well that was what Millenniumon wanted. But he never thought it would result in him being used by said Digimon, and by the gods that were supposed to protect this world. Why? Why did he always have to be the one to be broken down, to suffer again and again? Hadn't he suffered enough? He did not want to be bound to an evil Digimon. He didn't want to be in pain anymore. Funny. No one ever cared about what he wanted. Ken looked at his wrists. There were no bandages, for he realized he was physically the age he would have been when he first entered the digital world. Why him? Why was he still fighting? Ken closed his eyes. He knew why. Millenniumon wanted to exist. He wanted Rio. If he had allowed Rio to get hit instead of him, there would be no digital world presently, there would be no chosen children. Millenniumon could make sure Daisuke, Miyako, and Lori never got their D3s, nor their Digimon. He could make sure Taichi and the others never defeated Vamdemon. He could make sure they never got their Digivices, or make sure they were never born. A sickening thought, he realized as he thought about his old friend. Ryo always had a bit of a temper, and was a tad violent at times. It was nothing major, but sometimes the Digimon would overwork themselves just to please the legendary tamer in order to avoid said temper. It was something Ken had tried to remedy when he noticed the Digimon were working themselves to exhaustion again, while Ryo did nothing to stop them, unaware of what was happening right under his nose. Ryo had always felt guilty afterward. The distant attitude and temper was something he had picked up from his father, who used to work in the Russian military before settling down in Japan with his wife. He really did try to fix this over the years. But the temper, the distance, the violence was what Millenniumon wanted. With Ryo under his control, he could tear down the barriers, and no Digimon would be dumb enough to fight him. Ryo would kill them before they could even blink. There would be no one to stop the Tamer and the evil god from remaking the digital world in their image. He couldn't allow that to happen. He fought to protect his friends. He fought to protect all that he loved. Being used over and over again was just a side effect for not only to protect his dear friend, but everyone in both worlds. He suffered for their sakes, even when no one cared how much he was hurting for being forced to be the vessel of a monster and the burden that was crushing his soul for so many years. Ken. He saw Lilithmon placing her hands over his. No one deserves to suffer as much as you have. No one asked you if you wanted to be the human vessel to a cruel and wicked god. No one asked you if you wanted to be dragged into a war that you shouldn't have been in at such a young age. You proved everyone wrong. You are still the kind, sweet boy that we love, despite how many times someone has tried to break you. She smiled at him. You are strong, stronger than you may know. He frowned. No, he wasn't. He allowed others to take advantage of him, to use him until there was nothing left for him to give. You doubt because you have been hurt so many times. She knew what had been on his mind. She always did. There had been many who had fallen victim to Millenniumon's dark seed, and all perished. You are the only one to be able to hold him back, to stand up against him and his wicked ways. You are the only one who can stop him. Ken was surprised. He had not known of others being hit by the dark seed. Then again, there had been more than one of those things when they defeated the god the first time. Ken sighed. He knew what he had to do, but he really didn't want to do it. How do we bind him then? She smiled. You already have the means to do it. She lifted up his sleeves, turning it so that his palms were facing the sky, revealing 7 symbols tattooed on his skin, which Ken recognized as the 7 sigils of the 7 Olympian spirits. There were 3 tattoos on each side. On the left, from the bottom up, was the green seal of Full, the yellow seal of Haggith, and the purple seal of Aratron. On his right was the dark blue seal of Phalag, the orange seal of Bethor, and the light blue seal of Ophiel. On his left palm was his birthmark, a small black crescent moon, and on his right palm was the red seal of Oak. Ken gazed at them for half a second, his eyes widening ever so slightly as he remembered a time when he was very young. Wait, aren't those? Lilithmon gently traced the green symbol with a finger. Crown of Lust. She then moved up to the next symbol. The crown of Gluttony. The crown of greed. She then moved to his other arm, tracing it lightly. The crown of sloth. The crown of wrath. The crown of envy. She then gently traced the seal of Och. The crown of pride. Since the moment we saw you, we knew we had to protect you. We had all made an oath to protect you with our lives, but I'm afraid we had not done a very good job. I don't know why the holy beasts are hell-bent on killing darkness, knowing full well light cannot survive in this world alone. She had such a sad smile, but there was a flicker in her eyes, one that showed determination and unwavering loyalty. We may not be able to be with you physically, but we will in spirit, just as we are now. We will fight together by your side, always. Ken looked at each and every one of them. Trust was in each and every one of their eyes. Ken swallowed nervously. Memories were still returning to him now that the Holy Beast seal was broken. Many of them filled him with anger, which was only amplified by the crown of wrath. Ken closed his eyes and took several calming breaths. No more. He will not allow someone else to use him, to control him anymore. He will not allow himself to be someone else's puppet. This ends now. When Ken opened his eyes once again, he was no longer the scared 8-year-old boy of the past, but the wise man he had grown into from the pain, suffering, and love he had gained and endured throughout his life. Ken stood up and noticed that his clothes had changed. He was wearing a white, long-sleeved, closed-neck shirt, white pants, and knee-high boots. The shirt had gold trimming on the sleeves and along the bottom hem of the shirt. Over the shirt was an armor chest plate, but it was barely visible under the white knee-length tabard and cloak he wore over it. The short white coat was sleeveless. It had a pleated waterfall hem along the front right-hand side and a split from the rear hem towards the waist. Gold trimmings were also along the hem of the coat. On the right breast was the pattern of a stylized ornate rose, while the left had the pattern that looked like the triple moon. A double brown leather belt was wrapped around his waist, and upon closer inspection, he realized that there were 2 loops. One of the loops held a whip, but there was another loop big enough to hold a sword of some kind. A corset-style golden arm guards were tied over his wrists and stitched with leather and silver trims, and had some leather strappings around them to keep them in place. On both of his hands, he wore white gloves with silver and gold paneling on them. On his left hand, the crest of kindness was engraved on the silver paneling of the glove. On his right gloved hand, the panel was engraved with the crest of forgiveness. On his cloak, the 7 crowns of sin were engraved, positioned in a large circle. In the middle of the 7 crowns was the black outline of the triple moon, and within the full moon was the ornate rose. The crest of darkness truly was a beautiful combination of kindness and forgiveness. Ken smiled, softly, as he felt the energy of the crowns and his true crest coursing throughout his body. He was not afraid. Not anymore. He embraced the darkness, just as he had when he was a child, before the holy beasts interfered. I'm done being afraid. Ken turned, ready to face Millenniumon for good this time. Let's teach him a lesson, shall we? Anything for you, my king. No! He refused to believe this human, this tamer, was the reincarnation of darkness. He refused to believe that. There was only one god of darkness, and that was him. Only Rio had the same level of darkness as him, but his pitiful partner chose that weak Monodramon over him. He chose everyone over him. Ugh, why? The evil god glared down at the demon lords as they attacked once more. Chains coiled around his body, draining the energy out of him. He struggled against his binds, managing to break free just in time to avoid Demon's attack. But he wasn't quick enough to avoid Beelzebumon's. Chaos Flare! An unimaginable pain coursed throughout his body as the blast tore through his right side. Pieces of his cannons were torn off his back as he crashed to the ground, data slowly floating away. He laid there in agony as the three hovered in the air, preparing to finish him off. But it never came. The three hovered in the air, glaring down at him. He glared right back at them, but they did not move. And then he felt it. Darkness, far more pure, far more dangerous than his own. He glanced up to see the human and three more demon lords walking towards him. There was something different about him now. He was far more calm, far more confident, and wiser, far more deadly. He was not afraid. Not anymore. Fuck. Ken's gaze rested firmly on the once powerful Digimon that had been the source of so much grief and pain. Ken wanted to hate him, wanted to despise him, but he couldn't. Life was too short to hold grudges and the potent emotions of anger and hatred. As Ken got closer and closer to the Digimon, Ken finally came to terms with what he was about to do, and he almost felt sorry for the once powerful god. Millenniumon seethed at him, wanting to tear him limb from limb, but he knew he would not get very far with the king's protectors nearby. You really think you're all that now? Now that you remember you're the king? He sneered. Let me tell you something. You are not my king. My king is gone. I will never respect you. The demon lords glared heatedly at the evil god and his disrespectful tone. They were ready to approach him, ready to finish him off, but Ken stopped them with a hand. They stood still, weapons still raised. I don't expect you to like me, nor respect me as your king. I don't think we will ever get along, nor be anything close to friends. You have hurt a lot of Digimon, including myself and Ryo-san. Millenniumon growled. You insolent brat! How dare you! Dark wispy chains of darkness created by Ken's own will wrapped around Millenniumon's mouth and the rest of his body, silencing him, binding him in place. You have done enough talking. Ken's voice never once raised above that calm, neutral tone. You will listen to me. Don't forget that I am the king. This is my mind. He glared at him with so much hatred that he was sure the others would come to his defense, but they remained still, knowing Ken had everything under control. I should hate you for hurting my friends, for hurting me. Ken was staring into his eye, his whip hanging loosely at his side. I should hate you for everything you made me do, for everything you have done. He struggled against the chains. But I don't. I forgive you. This caused him to cease his failed attempts to escape. He stared at the human, in shock. From the corner of his eye, he noticed the Demon Lords were shocked as well. You are a chosen Digimon. Whether that means anything to you or not is beside the point, he said matter-of-factly. We all walk the thin lines between light and darkness. You chose darkness when you joined the Dark Masters, searching for a partner that never came. You fused with Chimeramon, hoping Ryo will hear your cries. You attacked the other chosen out of jealousy and loneliness. And you attacked the digital world and everyone in it in anger and hurt when Ryo rejected you. I never want to know what it's like to have your partner reject you from the start. I pity you, Millenniumon, but you placed this on yourself. By allowing hatred to consume you, you pushed away the only person that could have loved you, that could have cured the hole in your chest. Rio could have saved you, and now it's too late. The environment around them shifted and changed. With a single thought, the two of them were transported to the deep residence of his soul. It was a place of loneliness, despair, and bad memories. Ken had wasted so much time here. The control room of his former base had never felt like home. It was cold, suffocating, a prison. And now it was Millenniumon's. Computer monitors littered the walls. Memories of the past flashed on those screens. Memories he could not remember until his family destroyed the seal. Ken barely glanced at the memories. There was time for that later. In the middle of the dark room, where his throne used to be, was a huge cage. The cage was inscribed with Digimoji. It was the same Digimoji he had learned from Barbamon, the same one he had used to program the evil rings and spirals. As long as he was in this cage, Millenniumon would not be able to harm anyone, not even him. He was powerless. Ken rested his hand on the cold metal door with Millenniumon trapped within. The chains around him disappeared, with the exception of a single chain wrapped around his ankle. "I'll kill you! I'll kill you! I'll kill you!" Millenniumon tried to rush towards him, but the chain around his ankle prevented him, yanking him back just as he closed the metal door with a heavy heart. You could have had everything, Millenniumon. You didn't have to kill. You didn't have to kidnap or try to take over the digital world. We could have helped each other. Ken sounded very, very sad and tired. He sounded far older than he really was. I could have been your friend. Ken shook his head sadly as he placed an additional seal on the door, completely sealing Millenniumon's abilities. The door that led out of the control room opened. A bright light shined from the other side. I don't hate you, nor do I wish ill will against you. But for your crimes, you will stay here until I decide otherwise. Ken turned his back to him and took a step towards the open door, not noticing Millenniumon's head dropping in defeat. You should have never listened to Dark Janai. For the first time since Ken had known the cruel, evil god, Millenniumon wept, and Ken entered the light. Ken slowly opened his eyes. The room was dark. No sun was shining through the blinds that were down, giving him the impression that it was well into the night. The only light in the room was the crack from the door that had been left ajar. The lack of weight next to him only confirmed that Tsubasa was indeed gone. Gone with the man she truly loved, and his firstborn child. Ken bit his lip. He hated this room since the day he had found that letter. He had been avoiding sleeping in this room since she left, only coming into it to grab his clothes in the morning. Being in this room brought back the pain, but it was less now, more manageable. It was almost as if several pieces of his shattered heart had been put back together. After a moment of sorting through his thoughts, Ken glanced around the room, wondering how long he had been out. The room no longer had that lonely, suffocating, oppressive feeling it once held. It was more peaceful, calming even. Although that could be because of the vanilla-scented incense coming from somewhere to his left. Ken slowly sat up, his body protesting every inch of the way, so he could get a full view of his bedroom. There was just enough light for him to see the items displayed in front of him. Next to the queen-sized bed were 2 wooden nightstands. Each nightstand had a lamp and a photograph. Both photographs were of him when he was a kid. The first was of him and the others, and the other was of him and Leafmon. The closet, from what he could tell, only had his clothes. Frowning, he glanced at his dresser. All of Tsubasa's personal effects were gone. Perfumes, photographs, jewelry, everything. Every last one. Everything in the room had either been moved or replaced with something that was his. The tears began to form as he saw a box labeled trash in bold letters in the corner of the room. Daisuke. Oh, good, you're awake. Ken blinked, realizing Moromiya was sitting in a rather uncomfortable-looking chair next to his bed. How long had she been sleeping in that chair, waiting for him to wake up? I was really starting to worry that you were going to sleep another day. Moromiya looked exhausted, despite the nap she must have taken while he was out. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to worry you. Her smile made that fuzzy, fluttering feeling return. Don't worry about it. I understand. Ken smiled at her, feeling the pain slowly going away. How long have I been out? 2 days. No, 3 days. It's 7 in the afternoon now. 3 days? Ken wanted to shriek, but didn't. Not unless he wanted to wake Kuji up. I'm not that surprised. You haven't slept very well in 3 months. It was only a matter of time before your body shut down on you. Ken looked down, guilt slowly creeping in. Are you hungry? A little. She smiled brightly at him. Something fluttered in his chest. Great! Daisuke said you might be hungry when you woke up. He left a big pot of soup before leaving for work this morning. Actually, she looked at the clock on his nightstand. You should be here any minute now. There was then the sound of a door opening, and then the sound of something glass crashing to the ground. What was that? She was silent, but judging by the exasperated look on her face, she knew exactly what was happening. Yukimi Bodamon. Wait, what? He's here? He's been hiding under the sofa since Barbamon opened a portal home for us. Yagami and Daisuke have been trying to get him out for the past 3 days. He'll come out when Kuji's awake, but he disappears once he notices one of us. Ken didn't allow himself to wait for another second longer. He got out of bed quickly and made his way towards the noise. They passed by several boxes on the way there. Each one caused a tightening in his throat. Yuki! 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 Yukimi Bodamon's screams could be heard from down the hall, frantic in his want to escape. Ken and Moromiya stepped into the living room, just in time to witness the chaos. Yukimi Bodamon was running back and forth as Taichi and Daisuke tried to catch the elusive Digimon before he could hurt himself. Meanwhile, Hikari and Maiko were trying their best to calm Kuji down, who was crying in Hikari's arms. Hikari was the first to notice him as he gazed at the chaos. Ken-kun, you're awake! Everyone froze and looked in his direction. Once the initial shock passed, everyone smiled, relief passing through all of their features as they made their way over to him. Yukimi Bodamon was the first to get to him, as he jumped into his arms at amazing speed before Taichi and Daisuke could stop them. Yuki! 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 Ken held the small, trembling Digimon, whispering words of comfort until he was satisfied that Ken was not going to leave him alone again. It's okay. I'm okay now, see? The Digimon snuggled into his chest, his cries forgotten, as he smiled up at him. Yuki! Well, he's certainly happy to see you, Maiko said with a smile. He's not the only one, Hikari said as Kuji took notice of his father, reaching out for him desperately, his cries echoing around the room. Ken passed an unhappy Yukimi Bodamon to Moromiya. The small Digimon pulled himself out of her arms and rested against Ken's leg as Ken took Kuji into his welcoming arms. It's okay, Kuji. Papa's here. Papa's not going anywhere. Promise. Kuji continued to cry for several minutes, until he was sure his father would not disappear again. "I'm sorry. I'll never leave you again." Ken looked up with teary eyes to see Daisuke, Hikari, and Maiko in front of him, all worried about him, but all relieved to know he was okay. However, Taichi was still several feet away, looking at anywhere but at him. Ken walked over to him with the others still watching in confusion. "Taichi." He looked up at him. Guilt was in those brown orbs. He knew. He knew all along. Daisuke said the demon lords removed the seal. Ken nodded, not at all surprised that he knew. "Yes, they did. I'm starting to remember everything." "That's good," he said, trying to smile, but it did not look right on his face. "Never forgot you. I visited all your games for 3 years straight, but I could never bring myself to talk to you. I didn't want to accidentally activate that seal. I didn't want it to kill you." Everyone looked at Taichi in surprise. He had never told anyone about this. "It's okay, Taichi." "Okay?" His voice rose slightly. "How can it be okay? I failed to protect you when you needed me. I couldn't protect you when Janai placed that seal on you, and I couldn't tell anyone about what happened, no matter how much I wanted to. I broke Akiyama's promise." "No, you didn't. You did everything you could within your limits. They threatened you. There was nothing you could have done." The girls looked at each other, anger and concern simmering in their eyes. "You still looked after me even when I couldn't remember you. I was never really alone because of you." Taichi opened his mouth to retort the comment, but Ken wouldn't let him. No more guilt. No more pain. He was sick of it. "Could you have done more? Maybe. But you still protected me from afar. You still came after me even when it looked like I was so far gone. I can never fault you for that, Taichi." "I guess," he said, still not believing him. "I really wish we could have gotten to the TV set. Maybe all of this could have been avoided." "We never made it?" He shook his head. "Zuchiamon's destroyed it before we could even get there. They tortured you and I couldn't do anything." Ken sighed. The aftermath of that war was still a bit fuzzy. He remembered some, but not everything. "Will you tell me?" Taichi was silent for a moment as he glanced at his sister and wife. The two of them were frowning slightly, but they knew not to comment. This was something he had to do on his own. Regardless, they gave him small, supportive smiles. It was okay now. It was time to tell the truth. "Do you really want to know?" No, he really didn't. But he needed to know. He wouldn't be able to put the past behind him without knowing what happened. "No more secrets." Ken smiled softly. "I'm ready to know now." Taichi closed his eyes and slowly smiled. No more secret.